Right, Kenj, welcome to the podcast, mate. Thanks for giving up your time today.
Thanks for having me, Hayden.
So, I guess one thing I'll do is I just want to bury the hatchet before we get into anything of substance today. But is Nutri-grain really the Iron Man food of choice for people like yourself?
It's funny you asked that, mate, because I actually just finished having brekkie. And so pretty much what was on my, I guess, brekkie menu this morning, I kind of ate it in reverse. I normally eat some sort of cereal and then eggs and stuff like that, but I ate so I had some eggs on toast. Then at the moment, I've just got this, mate, just a craving for wheat bix at the moment. So I'm eating like wheat bix and banana and blueberries and honey and stuff like that. So that's my go-to. Mate, it changes whatever I'm craving. After a long surf, I normally smash some wheat bix or, have a bit of a craving for Nutri-grain. But, mate, I kind of just eat whatever I feel like, to be honest.
Yeah, I saw that when I was sort of looking into your backstory and doing a bit of research into your statistics and your career and everything. I sort of saw that you like to have a bit more of a fluid or kind of flexible approach to the way you eat coming into competition. You're not a big eater when it comes to pre-race, building up to pre-race. You're not really too much of a big eater. You kind of get quite nervous. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think everyone's different, and you speak to a lot of people before, whether it's an elite athlete getting ready to do a race, or if it's just a weekend warrior, getting ready to do a fun run or something like that. You get nervous, right? It's hard to eat. So normally my go-to is, mate, I'll normally kind of whip up a smoothie. My go-to is not normally the true protein kind of vegan range, just because it's super light and clean, and then I just throw in some bananas and berries and stuff like that. So, I kind of try and do that daily just to get ready for, when it comes to the week of a competition or a day of a competition, just so my gut's used to it. So, yeah, but on a race day, man, I barely eat anything. I kind of, I'll have that smoothie and some electrolyte drinks. But then, I'm super plain eater. I'll go for a couple of sandwiches with peanut butter and honey on it, and just snack on those all day.
Simple carbohydrate based foods, not too much fat, not too much protein.
Yeah, I find just whatever works for you. There's no right or wrong thing. And I think it's just, I'm 32 now and I've been doing this sport for, best part of 15, 16 years. And I've figured out kind of what works for me, what doesn't work for me. I'll make sure at the end of a big race day that I refuel properly with some big foods. And then the next day I'll go back to kind of snacking again.
And so that you're up this morning, I think the morning club, you got a bit of a session in this morning. What did that entail? And, how do you feel your training when it's so early in the morning? Do you train fasted? I know there's a lot of research these days about, fat adaptation with training and how that can influence your performance in competition. But, do you want to talk to the listeners a bit more about how maybe you fuel those early mornings too?
Yeah. So I love starting my morning with a coffee. And I think most people do, but I tend to function better with, I'll just make myself an espresso or a long black, and then I'll have a piece of toast again with peanut butter, half a banana on it, some honey. I don't train fasted. I went through a period where I tried it, and I got out of the pool when I'd finished, and I was absolutely ravenous. I was so hungry. I felt kind of depleted. And I kind of stuck to that for a lot of people will say that you've got to kind of stay to that fasted kind of routine for a while for it to kick in. But for me, I just didn't feel good doing it. I wanted something in my gut. I wanted some fuel there, and that kind of worked for me. But so this morning, alarm went off at 4:40, snoozed it once, as we do. And this morning, Thursday mornings, I normally paddle surf skis off the beach at Manly. So I got up, had my coffee and toast, and went down to the beach. Sun wasn't up yet. But for me, I call it the morning club. I started an Instagram page where it's kind of like just morning appreciation, kind of post people that love the morning. And I like to, that for me is the best time of the day. And there's a lot of like-minded people out there like that too. So, if there are people that don't actually get up and see the sunrise like I do, I'll take a photo of it and share it on my socials so they can see it too. So yeah, on the surf skis at 6:15, mate, we did a kind of a moderate to intense session this morning. It was quite short. It was 50 minutes, good warm up, and then we just did a lot of sprints off the beach, followed by a few waves to finish off, and then another coffee, and then here.
Yeah, Dever, the podcast, but the morning club is a great way to, share in that kind of community. I think that's one of the benefits of social media, isn't it? You can create a little bit of a community around even things like that, just purely appreciating the morning and the early risers. But as we were talking about with your nutrition before training, I guess with the how you mentioned the coffee, there's that glycogen sparing effect as well with caffeine as well, where you can utilize your fat stores before you switch over to your carbohydrates. So I guess that provide some additional, performance-related benefits as well, which is why, caffeine is such a important part of a lot of people, a lot of athletes, nutritional principles. In the last 10 years, you've really I guess now's a really pertinent time to get you on the podcast, mate, because the last few years have been really successful for you, in particular with your surf life saving. So you've been a professional Ironman for the last 10 years, but you really started to see the fruits of your labor winning Surf Life Saving Athlete of the Year in 2018, and then the Nutri-grain Ironman Series champion 2019 to 2020. So you won up there on the Gold Coast, and it was an enduro event, as I understand, and you were sitting almost dead last in that event, and you managed to really pull yourself through and get the bickies at the end there. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how fulfilling that was, given you've been in surf life saving for so long, and now you're really started to see all your hard work starting to pay off?
Yeah, mate, our sport is for those people that don't quite know what it is, it's it consists of swimming, board paddling, surf ski paddling, and running in the transition, and it all takes part off the beach. So, there's certain things you can control, which is your fitness, the craft you're using, and your health. The big key factor you can't control is Mother Nature. So, in that race in particular, I was actually off to a really good start and then just got hit by a big wave and it pushed me back to dead last. I was probably last by about, I'd have to say nearly a minute or 2 minutes with a couple of other guys. And I guess the beauty of that day was the surf was big. And normally, I try to, put myself in a mindset of like, if you do get bad luck at some point in that race, the luck will turn if you keep, somewhat positive and, just keep chipping away and executing that process really. And it did. And, I found like the race went for an hour and a half, and each leg that I did, I had my brother as my handler at the time, which is similar to like your golf caddy. And he was just, kind of giving me a couple of spurs of, inspiration really. He was just saying, yeah, mate, you're doing really well. And I'm sitting dead last. Right. So it kept the spirit somewhat high. He said, just keep chipping away, the luck will turn. And, anyway, I found myself just like creeping through the pack, picking up spot after spot. And then there was a jet ski on the lead pack. And I just kept an eye on that jet ski as to like, all right, how close am I getting to that jet ski? And before you know it, I was kind of sitting in sixth, and then I was fifth, and then fourth. And I was like, Jesus, I'm in a kind of into the last leg. I think it was a swim or a surf ski leg next to one of my idols growing up, Kai Hurst. And, him and I did the last ski leg, went into the last ski leg together, and I just backed myself and ended up getting the win. So, I think our sport, it's a very, very character building sport. You can be the best on the day, the fastest on the day, and things just not go your way. And that's kind of, for me, I kind of take that and apply that to life. Some days it's your day, the other days it's just not. And what will be, will be.
I think that's one of the enormous principles we've talked about a lot in the previous guests has been, overcoming barriers and obstacles. And I think one of those probably innate challenges with your sport, as you say, is just the open nature of the environment in which you're faced with. And as you said, Kai Hurst, one of your idols growing up, how was it, I guess, from a young age, idolizing someone like him, and then as you grow up, eventually getting to the stage where you know, you're able to compete against some of these guys?
Yeah, it's for me, it was always I always wanted to, I guess, what's the right word? It's, you know, racing against guys like this. I always wanted to earn their respect. But at the same time, it's like I wanted to be so just race so hard, and for me, I wanted to earn their respect in a racing sense. Go out there, be that be that young kid at the time that's going to push to the front and back himself. And if things don't go the way, so be it. But you know, put them up for a good fight. You know, and then you know, the older you get, you kind of become, I guess, mates with them, and you realize that you know you race. You know, a race is a race on the field, and then off the field, it's like you know you catch up, and you don't really talk about the racing. So yeah, no, Kai and I, we've you know formed a really good friendship away from that. He you know he's helped me with a lot of coaching. He's actually handled for me when I won the Ironman series. Yeah, man, and we're just close mates. I've got a little Leo now, and Kai's got a couple of kids, and you know we've got a lot, I guess, more in common now, which is great.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit later in the podcast about, you know, how it has been so far raising Leo and some of the considerations you're going to have around Leo and water safety. And, you know, obviously growing up on the northern beaches, we're always, you know, surrounded by water. But, you know, life-saving isn't just, you know, a performance-related sport, but I'm sure it's taught you a lot about, you know, water safety and just being around the ocean.
Yeah, so I grew up, mate. I grew up like just a crossroad from Bungan Beach, on the northern beaches, and you know, my dad was a mad keen surfer, and mum and dad used to always take us to the beach as a young kid. Um, I think for their peace of mind, it was always they wanted us boys. I got two brothers as well. They wanted us to be safe at the ocean. So you know, learning to swim and learning to be familiar in the ocean was a non-negotiable. Um, and from there, it just you know I'm a competitive kid, and both my brothers are too. And we whatever we did, we just wanted to be really good at it. You know, whether it was swimming lessons or whatnot, we just tried to be the best in the class, be the fastest in the class, get up to the highest possible class, and then start doing squads. And then, man, the thing it just snowballs and goes so quick. But you know, we're also juggling a bunch of other different sports too. So, you know, but you know, growing up on the northern beaches, basing myself here now, my wife and I with Leo, it's like, you know, my advice for any parent living on the northern beaches or on the east coast, west coast, or living on the coast of Australia is like, man, you've got to keep your kids in swimming lessons. You've got to get them familiar with the ocean because the amount of deaths that occur every year in that ocean purely based off, you know, lack of knowledge, you know, swimming between the flags or just getting yourself into a sticky situation because you don't know how to assess the ocean properly, man, it's frightening. So for me, it's like, you know, I try and spread that word as much as possible and, you know, take it with a grain of salt. But, you know, when I was a young kid, you know, I nearly drowned in a swimming pool. You know, wandered off at a barbecue. The gate was left open and I fell in the pool. And, you know, my older brother at the time, he jumped in the pool and saved me. You know, I was eyes open, mouth open, full of water. Lucky he just got to me in time. And, you know, I can kind of live to tell the tale. But, you know, the years following that, probably, I think it was probably 5 years after that, I was petrified of the water. You know, not just the ocean, swimming pools, the bath, you know, the ocean, like anything. I'd go to the beach with my shoes and socks fully clothed, not wanting to even go near the water. You know, and it wasn't until probably the age of, I guess, seven or eight. And that's when mum and dad really started to push down the road of the learning to swim. Let's get into nippers. But they were not in any way, shape, or form pushy. It was just, let's encourage him. Let's chip away. If he doesn't want to do it, that's fine. You know, his brothers will be doing it. He'll feel like he's missing out, and you know, kind of approach it in a different way. But yeah, I'm super passionate about that, and you know, I'll be making sure my little boy's you know, in the water as much as he can be.
It's so ironic, isn't it, Kenj? Because your strongest leg of any of the Ironman series, and probably what pulled you through in that series win, was your swim leg. So, going from a young boy who was almost scared of the ocean after a near drowning event, and being raised, do you think your parents had any role in, I guess your swimming expertise now in the ocean and your ability to, pull through with some of those big events you've managed to win?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I think they were just very encouraging in whatever I wanted to do. You go for it. My grandfather, he kind of gave his advice to my dad, and also instilled it in myself and my brothers too. Is it's just like, if you do it once, do it right. If you're going to do something, just do it to the best of your ability. And that's what kind of I approach every day with. I approach my sport with it. I turn up to training. It's just, I want to get the best out of myself possible today. And I've applied that to my swimming from a young age. And I look back now, and I'm 32. I'm the oldest person in the field of the Ironman, and my swim leg's still up there with some of the young fast boys. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
And so the statistics on drowning, so you mentioned, there's quite a lot of drownings that are related to preventable causes, lack of education, lack of knowledge. But 1,025 drowning incidents occur in Australia every year. That's a crude rate of 3.99 incidents per 100,000 people. So, and if you think about living on the Australian coastline too, we've got, as you would know, extent of the rips and currents and the way the ocean is, it's really is a vital skill, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I just like, training down at Manly Beach every day. They have the red and yellow flag set up. They sometimes have two sets set up, but yet you still see, these people that are, mate, it's purely just lack of awareness, lack of education. They just go and swim in the water, and they think that water's, the same as the safe water in the rips, where, the lifeguards and the, patrol members, they do the due diligence for these people and make sure you're swimming in the right place. But again, like, it's a hard one. It's just constant education. I think people like Surf Life Saving Australia, Nutri-grain, they've done some really cool campaigns. I was lucky enough to be part of one last year with Emma McKeon, and they'd have a QR code on the side of a Nutri-grain box, and you could scan that QR code and punch in, the closest postcode to where you are, and it will show you a patrolled beach, where the closest patrolled beach is. Because, like, if you're from, overseas or maybe in the country, and you don't really know what the difference between a patrol beach and an unpatrolled beach is, you're just going to go to the beach, and go for a swim and think, it's sweet to swim anywhere. But then that's when accidents happen. And on those unpatrolled beaches, man, it's pretty scary. Like, we go up to Crescent Head every year, and on the back beach there, it's an unpatrolled beach. And then you could be halfway down the beach, no one around, go for a swim, caught in a rip, and you're gone. No one's even going to know about it. So, there's some really cool awareness out there, some good education out there, and they're really trying to be on the front foot with it.
Yeah, that's a really great initiative, I guess, from Nutri-grain, isn't it, to put that QR code on the side of the box. Is there any apps or anything that, for any people out there that are unfamiliar with the surf, is there any apps out there that people can use to, identify patrolled beaches or, where they can swim safely?
I think, look, in terms of apps, I'm not 100% sure, but in terms of, I guess, websites to go to, you just, if you're in Queensland, New South Wales, whatever, just go to Surf Life Saving New South Wales. I'm sure you can navigate on there, and that'll be pretty clear to tell you where those kind of patrol beaches are. Yeah.
And for any parents out there, it's really great that to hear yourself and Holly had Leo. What's that experience been like raising Leo so far? It must be so such a great time in your life to see bringing a little one into the world and being able to raise them.
Oh man, I pinch myself every day. I think back to, I guess, this time last year when Holly was pregnant, and I was just so excited to meet that little fella. Well, I didn't know it was a little boy at the time, but that little thing that was inside her belly, and mate, now he's out. He's just got the best personality, and like, I take my hat off to any mother and father out there. Like, it is not easy. at all. It is the most rewarding thing ever. And I can tell you right now, one thing that is much, much harder than doing an Ironman race is trying to get Leah to sleep at night. Man, I've spent there's been nights where I'd be in there for an hour, hour and a half, trying to bounce him and get him to sleep. I'm just absolutely drenched in sweat, and mate, the kid just didn't want to go to sleep. So, I take my hat off to any parent out there that's been there, done it in the trenches. Soon to be, it's a bloody exciting time of your life.
Yeah, I see all the Instagram stories, mate. I mean, you're so invested in Leo, and it's so great to hear. How is that translated across to, I guess, your thoughts? And I think this will help a lot of if there's any parents out there with real young children that they've just brought into the world, starting to get them involved in swimming and water sports and water safety. What's your kind of stance on that, and what's your approach going to be with Leo?
Yeah, it's a good question. A good friend of mine, he's just actually opening up a new learn to swim facility called Aquaculture Swim, and that's on the northern beaches. And man, they start from, he opens in, I think, like 10 days from now, and we've already got Leo enrolled, ready for his first learn to swim class. So, mate, I'll be getting him in the water from 9 months old. Like he already loves being in the water with myself and with Holly. Whether it's the bath, the ocean, or the pool, he loves it. But I don't want to be that dad that, because I love the water and love the ocean and have done, surf life saving and Ironman racing. I don't want to be that dad to push him down that road. I want him to feel comfortable with other people in the water and, really just want to be there himself. Again, it will be a non-negotiable in terms of, getting him to swim competently. And this is one thing that I guess address with him when he's old enough, but it's like, there is nothing more rewarding in life than pulling someone out of a rip, than saving someone on the beach, and bringing them back to shore to live, to see another day, to go home to their families. There's been times of training, man, where we've pulled someone out of a rip. They might not have been far off the shore, but it's like, if you'd left them, man, they might not have gone home to their family that night. So if I can raise Leo with that kind of mindset, I want you to be strong in the water, whether you use it in racing or in, everyday life, I don't really care, but I want you to be competent and be able to save someone's life if need be.
Yeah, regardless of being whether he's an elite, Ironman athlete, but you just want him to learn to swim and be competent and safe in the water. It's really pertinent for me too. I guess one of my own personal stories is that it's really vivid. When I was in Fiji as a youngster, my dad dived into the pool with all his clothes on. I really remember it vividly, with his shoes on, shirt, shorts, to save my sister. So I think dad or mum, she must have gotten into the water and they weren't watching, and she didn't have her bubbles on, floaties. But she was in the water without those and just went straight to the bottom. And dad dived in with all his clothes on, and dad's brought me up around the surf clubs as well, and helped me become a confident swimmer in that respect. So I think it's really good to advocate for teaching our kids to be stronger swimmers. And we'll plug aquaculture in the show notes so people can jump on board with that and get involved with your mate's business that he's starting up.
Absolutely.
Mate, did you play any other sports as a youngster when you were growing up?
Yeah, so I'd played rugby league and rugby union. I played that for school at Pittwater High School, and then I was played soccer. Man, I rode dirt bikes for years. There's kind of a lot of stuff really that I did. Did a lot of running, touch footy, cross country, all those kind of sports that you do at school. I kind of took them out of school as well, and it was really funny that I don't know why. I look back now, like I kept gravitating back to pool swimming. I just had this, I don't know, kind of love for it, because I guess because I knew that if I worked the hardest, I'd get the result, and probably because it was in the water as well. you don't get too hot when you're in there, opposed to being at an athletics track or a motorbike track or on the footy field. So yeah, I kind of dabbled in everything, and my parents were so encouraging for that. They didn't want me to specialize in one sport until I was probably 15 or 16. And I look back now and said, yeah, that was a really great idea. Because now I see so many kids, just they're very good at something, but they get told from, certain coaches who may have their own agenda that they should be focusing more on this. And that comes back to kind of goal setting and educating your kids and different athletes as to where they want to be in 10 years. Where they think they want to be or where they do want to be, and breaking those goals down into bite-sized chunks. For me, if you'd asked me, I would have had no idea. It wasn't until I was probably about 15 or 16 and I started following the Ironman circuit a little bit more. I thought, that's a cool sport. They're in the ocean. They're fighting big waves. They're good swimmers. They're good paddlers. They're fit-looking guys and girls, and that's what kind of, I guess, pushed me towards that.
And in that first experience, when you first got a taste of Ironman, I think you said you were 18 years old. And in your own words, I think you got demolished by some of those big name guys. You came in as a youngster and they kind of ate you for breakfast there. How humbling was that experience, and what did you learn from that in the early stages?
Yeah, it is very humbling. It's like a young, 18-year-old running out on a footy field and just getting absolutely flattened.
Yeah.
It shows that you've got talent, but lack a lot of experience, which I was okay with. I could swallow that. And you've got weaknesses. For me, from day one, my big thing was always I could identify a weakness and try and work on it. I knew my swimming was my strength, and I'll make the most of that and try and capitalize on that. But my surf ski paddling and my board paddling was weak compared to those older guys. So, I went back to the drawing board and slowly chipped away at it and came back bigger and stronger the following years, and slowly climbed my way through the ranks. But it's, one thing that I guess I always have had in me from a young age is just it's a fighting mentality. I whether I'm fit or unfit, I put my foot on the line and just want to fight, go out there and race as hard as I can and do whatever I can, whether it's for a team or for myself, an individual sport. And that's one thing you can't coach. I really try and help the kids that I train with now kind of understand that is that the best way to get better at racing is just do more racing. And, if you can, after a race, take a couple of notes as to where you went wrong, what you did right and what you did wrong, and let's come back to training and address it.
Yeah, and it's awesome to hear that. I guess a lot of the guests we've had on in the past on this podcast have kind of reiterated the same thoughts, about just getting in there, the repetitions, just having a dig, giving it a crack and really pushing yourself is a really important message for a lot of youngsters as well. When you were getting started, you kicked off your Nippers career, Coleroy Life Saving Club at the age of 9 in the under 10s. So I guess Coleroy's probably one of those beaches where it's not as rough. You'd say the surf isn't, the swell isn't as obviously as big as somewhere like Manly, or you go down to Curl Beach, for instance. When did you make the transition to Manly Surf Life Saving Club? And I guess in the early days there, what was it like? I understand that as you went through the ranks, you got into carpentry as well. And I think there was a time in your career where you got to a point where, you had to give up the carpentry to pursue your Ironman career. So was that at Manly, or was that as you're working?
Yeah, so I guess if I was to give you a quick, snapshot of, the timeline of my career, I started at Coleroy, and I raced, I learned kind of all I knew through the ranks there at Coleroy, got to the Opens, and I always had this burning desire to see what all the fuss was about in Queensland, because we'd turn up to certain races and they were just so much more dominant than the Sydney guys. And so when I finished school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. like most people, and my dad's a builder, so I went and did my carpentry apprenticeship with him. And one amazing bit of, I guess, advice my parents said was that, you can chase what you want to do, but we always want something for you to fall back onto, if the sport doesn't work out or if you get injured or whatever it might be. So I did my 4-year carpentry apprenticeship with my dad and my younger brother as well. And once I finished that apprenticeship, got my ticket, and I said, I want to chase being an Ironman for the next couple of years. And they said, go for it. So I decided that I was going to go to Mooloolaba Surf Club up on the Sunshine Coast. I spent 3 years there, and they were the 3 probably hardest training years of my life. The squad that we had was just first class. The coach we had was first class. It really taught me what you need to do in this sport to be successful on the field. And I got to a point then after kind of 3 years, my girlfriend at the time, Holly, my wife now, was still in Sydney. So we lived apart for best part of 3.5 years. She'd come up every second weekend or I'd come home. But it was tough. There were opportunities arising for me sponsorship-wise that were based out of Sydney. But if I wasn't living in Sydney, they weren't too interested. So I got to a point where I thought there is, kind of weighed up both scenarios. And for me, it was there was more in Sydney for me than there was on the Sunshine Coast. I loved my time there, but to be honest, it was time for me to move home. I did a short stint at Newport Surf Club. Realised that probably wasn't the right program for me, and moved to Manly. The coaches there were exactly what I needed at the time. Surrounding myself with older guys, top level coaches, and a really, really good culture. And so I've been at Manly now for the best part of 6 years. And mate, like moving home to Manly it's where I've won, my Australian title and my Nutri-grain title and a lot of others. So yeah.
Do you think, so we talked a bit earlier about, I guess, the open environment, the nature of being on the water and in the ocean. And then we just talked about before then about, whenever you've gone into an event, you just given it a red hot crack. And it's all about the repetitions and getting in the water and getting through the work. But when it comes to, competing and training in a certain, I guess, location. So say you move from Collaroy Surf Life Saving Club up to Mooloolaba. How does that, affect your training? I guess if you've got an environment where the swell is often bigger, there's more rips and currents, and you really have to, the ocean is challenging you a lot more. In a competitive environment, that's only going to improve your prospects of winning and your performance. So how did that, obviously the training was a lot harder and you had a better coaching team and, the people around you, pushed you to excel, but how did that environment also challenge you? I guess the conditions of the ocean specifically.
Yeah, so Mooloolaba, if you're familiar with it, is not many waves there. So it was quite flat most days. But on the flip side, we were very, very fit. We'd mix up our training from being at Mooloolaba or to Kawana, One Beach South, or down to Maroochydore, where they're renowned for more, I guess, bigger surf, rips, currents, all that sort of stuff. And if you can juggle both of those, I guess, locations in terms of getting yourself fit and then getting skills, mate, that's ideal. But I guess from a young age prior to going up to Mooloolaba, being at Collaroy, some of the guys that I used to train with at Collaroy, they're some of the best skilled surf ski paddlers, board paddlers, that I'd ever seen. And Collaroy isn't renowned for having big waves, but we train at South Narrabeen and other locations which have big surf. So I was always big on, hey, let's get the skills done first. Let's get them under your belt, and then anyone can get fit.
So we talked a bit about, I talked to Mel Gainsford in the last episode of the podcast about her, when she was an Olympic athlete. It was her first Olympics, and then her first Commonwealth Games. It wasn't until after those events that she actually got to a stage where she was paid to be an elite athlete. And obviously the opportunities for women are very different for males, although it's improving. I guess the opportunities for women, females versus males is very different. And you talked about how, as you're going through the Ironman series in the last decade, you're picking up points along the way, and you're a strong contender, but you never really got to that to winning until in the last few years. And you've talked about how you've had thoughts at stages about devoting more time to your career prospects, whether it be working in your media company with your brother, which we'll talk about, your app development, potentially going into carpentry, but obviously bringing a child into the world. How has that impacted you growing up? Have you been on, a lot of money with your Ironman competing, or is it mainly through endorsements and commercial opportunities and sponsorships that you've kind of made a living through this?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because a lot of people, look back to the glory days of Uncle Toby's and those kind of days and saw how much money there was. Those times have changed significantly. There's not a lot of money as such in this sport. I think at a top level, there's probably maybe 4 guys or 5 guys and girls that can make somewhat a living out of it. Most of it comes through endorsements, somewhat prize money as well. But also, like, from a young age, man, I always was told that it's not about what someone can pay you, but it's always about what you can bring to the table as well. And for me, I've always tried to view it through that lens as to how can I add value to this brand. If I can't, that's fine. It's not the right partner for me. So I'm really big on that now, and it's the same in, I guess, my media business now too. Is that if we can't add value to a client, I'm happy to not take that work. I need to be interested and love that product, love what they're doing, and be interested in it to add value to it. But also, what our sports taught me is that it's taught me to work really, really, really hard for not an awful lot. So I can take that work ethic now and apply that to something which will pay me better than what this has in the past, and I think that's a real positive.
Yeah, and I guess in the early days, investing so much time in your training, and not being able to put those hours into, work, or there's not that same financial incentive. Obviously your friends around you might have been finishing up with their university degrees and heading into the workforce. Was there ever a moment there where you thought about, retiring and then getting stuck into your trade or working on your own businesses?
Yeah. So when going back to the trade stuff, when I finished that, there were aspects that I really liked, and there were aspects that I wasn't so interested in. I loved being hands-on and the manual labor of it, and feeling like I've worked a hard day. But I guess the one thing that I really did love about it was, and I saw myself being somewhat of a builder and constructing a real high performance team, whether it be in the building industry or any other industry. I like the thought of building high performing teams. And I think that's why I've always loved being part of an Australian team or certain teams in my sport. So, finishing that trade, I was like, I want to be able to build my own team with something I'm interested in. And it just gravitated towards that media space.
So tell us a little bit more about Louis Media. So I understand that you're working with your brother on this project, and I think it's quite a unique thing. You've discussed this, how it's not about being a professional athlete. It's about the value you can add to your client as well. So working in media and partnering with a lot of the different sponsors or brands that you've worked with in athlete, from an athlete point of view, how's that been, coming out of the sport of Ironman and then putting your different cap on and then having to work around, marketing and what's that taught you about business and, the way things are these days with social media too, how things are changing?
Yeah, the social media space is just a ever evolving space. the changes that are occurring they're happening at such a fast pace. So if you're not on the ball, it is quite easy to fall behind. But in terms of my training, like and trying to take that cap off and put the other one on, I don't really view it like that. I do most of my kind of strategic thinking, whether it be for work, training, or whatever it is, whilst I'm training. It's really bizarre. Like, I'll be kind of trying to somewhat problem solve or look for a new avenue to, I guess, kind of unlock for certain clients when I'm actually doing my training. And then I finish training and it's sparked this idea and I jump straight on my laptop and start applying it. So it's, I kind of view it as just it's my life, right? It's not this or that. Which it's funny because I have other mates that are, whether they're in that corporate or other kind of, they've got one full-time income, they kind of view me as like, oh yeah, you live the dream, you barely work, you just train. But if I was to add up the hours I train and the hours that I spend working on clients, it probably works out to be anywhere from 60 to 80 hours a week, right? And being an athlete, it's not as simple as just, turning up and going for a swim at the beach every day, as much as it might look like that from a social media perspective. It's, I don't like the word sacrifices because I don't believe it is a sacrifice. It's a choice that I've made. It's a choice that I've made and a commitment, and I love doing that. With Holly and Leo, it's like they've made the choice. We've all made the choice to do it together. And as soon as Holly taps me on the shoulder and says, you're not devoting enough time to us or the family or this or that, man, that's the time when I'll take that cap off and it's done. But right now it's a really good balance. It helps me mentally, stay mentally fit as well as physically fit and delivering on all fronts.
I really liked the way you put it at the start of the podcast, and you talked about how even this morning when you got up your session, you hit snooze, and creates that real element to you about, just because you're an athlete doesn't mean you're 100% motivated all the time. It doesn't mean that, you're not working hard behind the scenes on your own projects and dedicating the hours week to week. I think it's, as you said, with social media, it's so easy to fall into the trap of seeing, everyone's highlight reel and just thinking that their life is perfect. But really, there's a lot of hard work that's gone in behind the scenes. We spoke about this with Mel Gainsford about, in the early days, she had to move from her home in Narromine to the Big Smoke in Sydney at the age of 9, with moving away from her parents and her home to undertake her training to be, a sprinter. We've all had to make those sacrifices. Like, you had to move away from Holly for 3 years. You had to forgo all those potential sponsorship opportunities that existed in Sydney. So a lot of sacrifices you've had to make along the way, and a lot of challenges and hurdles. And one of those hurdles, which you experienced early in your career, like many athletes, has been injury. And so you injured your knee in 2012 at the Ironman series in Perth, Western Australia. Can you tell us a little bit about that moment when you injured your knee?
Yeah, it was actually at Scarborough Beach. Yeah, and I think I was a couple of points off leading the series, the Ironman series. I think it was round 4 or 5 at the time, and I was probably having the best series I've had to date. And it was purely off the start. I ran down and I picked up it was an endurance event, so we had a 5 kilometer ski, a 1 kilometer 1 kilometer swim leg, a 3K run, and then a 4 kilometer board leg, right? And we did that twice. And it was at the very start where I ran down, picked up my ski. Just as I was getting into the water, I hit a pothole, hyperextended my left knee, and just pretty much blew everything out the back. My PCL and my medial, just everything, just an absolute mess. And look, I didn't know the severe, I guess, the severity of the damage I'd done. So I just jumped on my ski as you do in any other race and, just keep going for it. I was probably behind a fair bit and caught my way back into the pack and got myself towards the front. It wasn't until I got off my surf ski and did a small transition into that swim leg, I realized I couldn't even put weight on it. I thought it might have been, like in a game of footy or even walking down the street, if you roll your ankle, you kind of walk it out and it's all good to go. There was no chance of that. And I finished the 1 kilometer swim leg, and at the time, Hayden Quinn He was commentating, and then my wife Holly was there, and they carried me out of the water. And man, like that was like I just physically could not go any further. Like I wanted to try and just keep pushing, but I just couldn't. And I realized right then and there that series is done. It was really, really hard to swallow. I had made the move from Sydney up to there, put all my eggs in that basket, and had a really, really red hot crack, and that happened. And I felt sorry for myself for probably a week, and then I got some really good advice from a mentor that's not in the sport, and they said that you got two options here, mate. You can sit here and feel sorry for yourself, or you can park it and start working on your rehab and get on with life. And I've carried that through to right till today. And it's man, like that day, I look back now and just go, shit. That was one of the toughest kind of things emotionally that I've dealt with, and I know it's injury. So in the scheme of things in life, it's tiny, right? There's way bigger things that go on in life that are way worse than that. But to me, that was my life. That was my all, and it felt like it just crumbled. But we got back on the horse and kept pushing.
So how did you come back from that mentally? I guess what advice did you receive? And how did that influence you? Obviously with your rehab as well. We talked about how you might not have been on the same income at this stage or the endorsements, because it was only early in your career, wasn't it? About 10 years ago now. So
Yeah.
did you have to pay for your own rehabilitation, or were you, was that sorted out through the clubs or any sponsors?
Yeah, I was quite lucky with the rehab and all that. It was covered in the event that I was done, so the insurance of the event covered it. Okay. But it was tough, and like the first probably month was really tough. And then I started to see progress, and I doubled down and became obsessed with the process of getting better and stronger, and how I'm gonna, come back better than this. And you know what? It's amazing what the body can do. It recovers, and you get back into a training plan, and you start setting new goals again. And there is always that fear in the back of your mind that you're going to run into another pothole and do your leg again. And that was more what I had to overcome, more than just physical stuff. It was just that mental fear of it happening again.
And so how long did the rehabilitation phase take? How long was it before you were back in the water on the board? Or were you doing paddling, and swimming work without weight bearing initially?
Yeah, I was doing hardly anything, to be honest, man. It was because the swelling was so severe in like everything from my knee was down into my calf. So it was just like there was just so much fluid in my calf. It felt like that my calf was actually going to explode. So like I had to take probably, I think it was probably 2 or 3 weeks of just like icing that for that swelling to go down, and then we had to start kind of that rehab stuff. And yeah, it was. I probably got back in swimming maybe 3 months or something. Maybe 2 months. Yeah, just starting to get the body moving, because I just had to. I had to start moving. That's when I feel like you can get yourself into a bit of a rut, especially if you're injured or things aren't going your way. If you're not moving, that's where you start mentally getting quite affected.
In terms of the lowest point in your career, that moment then when you had that injury, looking back on that now, and we talk a lot about how Ironman is such an unpredictable sport. You're in that open environment of the water, where the conditions always changing. One day there's 12 foot waves. Sometimes you got super cold waters. You got gale force winds. I imagine that the nature of that environment also lends itself to injuries like this, with soft sand, hard sand, a number of different competitors all banked up in the one spot, racing to get out around the can and get back in off the beach. You do anything you can to win. How prominent are injuries like this in Ironman sport?
Yeah, they're probably not as, they probably don't occur as much as often as you think they would. There's always little niggles here and there, bumps and bruises and things like that. But I think you train in so many different conditions to prepare yourself for all those different conditions, whether it be hard sand, soft sand, all that sort of thing. So for me, I like to go in as positive as I can be, and regardless of the conditions, it's always perfect for something. If the surf's big, it's perfect that you get to kind of race your own race and not worry about the other guys, and you get to get a good wave, back in, or get hit by a big wave. When it's flat, there's an opportunity to sit and kind of draft and wash ride people. If the sand's hard or soft, it's like, hard sand, it's easy to run on. Soft sand, it's, other guys struggle on it, So I always try and find a somewhat of a perfect scenario to latch onto, opposed to going, oh man, the surf's big, I'm going to get smashed.
Yeah. I guess from that perspective with your training, I've heard, you're one of the hardest trainers amongst all the athletes, the Ironman athletes. Can you tell us a little bit about what a week of training in the life of Kenj looked like?
Yeah, I think when people say someone's a hard trainer, especially in our sport, and look, you could probably relate it to nearly every sport too, is that most of the athletes do the same thing. They do the same thing on roughly the same day. It's more what you do when you're turning up and the mindset you're in when you turn up. At a young age, I always wanted to be leading. I like to lead from the front. I don't like to, take an easy option and sit on people's, wash on a board or a ski and stuff like that. I really like to get the best out of myself if that's what the session presents. And saying that, there are days where I like to have a session where it's a recovery session and I take it easy. And I'm not up the front trying to lead or something like that. But it's, I guess the mindset, and I think the attitude of racing now compared to when I was a young guy coming through the ranks has changed so much. The reason I probably race the way I do, and some people view it as he won't give you an inch, and some people will view me as being a dirty racer. But I leave absolutely everything out there. I do not give anyone an inch. I put my best foot forward and I race as hard as I can. And when I was that young 17, 18-year-old racing in the series, I learnt that I had to do that to be able to hold my ground in that field. Where those guys just swam all over me. On the board, they just smashed past me. Like, they didn't care. I was just this young kid coming through and they weren't going to give me an inch. So I thought, shit, I've got to square up and not give them an inch. Where nowadays, the young kids just, man, they want everything given to them. In a race, it's like they'll come up next to you, and if they swim on top of you and you do it back to them, they're going to get upset, and when you get to the beach, they're going to make a deal of it. It's like, man, that's racing. I look at someone like Max Verstappen, right, in the F1. Man, that guy gives no one an inch. And I think the rules are the rules, and you play by the rules and don't cross that line as to what's fair and cheating. That's okay. Where I can't see guys like Max Verstappen getting disqualified every race because he's a hard racer. He rattles people. And I think if you want to be the best in any sport, you've got to be that guy who's not going to give anyone an inch.
Yeah, it's hard to show etiquette in the heat of the moment, isn't it? Too, when you're racing, balls to the wall, giving it everything. There's obviously going to be circumstances where you really got to get on top of someone when you're trying to, win. At the end of the day, everyone's there to win, aren't they? No one wants to come second or third or last for that matter. So,
and look, I'm the first person, man, to be honest, that if you get beaten on the day and you're just not the best guy on the day, mate, I'm stoked for you.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it hurts, but it is what it is. So yeah.
And we spoke to Mel Gainsford again in that last episode about how she found later in her career that less is more. So training as to obviously get better, you need to train harder. But where do you draw the line in the sand? Where as you get older, kind of hampers your recovery or your performance isn't improving at the rate you want it to. Have you found that doing less, but I guess quality over quantity? I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
In terms of your training as you got older now, and how's that impacted? Obviously, in the last few years, we talked about your success. Have you found that that's worked really well for you?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a type of guy, I love to work hard, and I love to just turn up and always be there. My swim coach a few years ago told me that, if you turn up every session, it's hard not to get a result. But yeah, to your question, absolutely. It's really, I guess, coming to light now more than ever, especially with my sleep, with the little man. Quality over quantity. There's not a lot of sleep. To be fair, I get a lot more than mum does. But it's yeah, it's definitely something where if I listen to my body, and I guess that's the hard thing. It's the hard thing when you're training with crew that are sometimes almost 10 years younger than you, and they're used to seeing you, leading and going to the front and all this sort of stuff, training so hard that when you have a session where you just want to take it easy or you have it off, they try to use you as the example and say, "Oh, but he had the day off, or he's sitting at the back, or he's put flippers on, or and it's like, man, you got 10 more years till you can do that." But I try to lead by example, for our young crew anyway.
Yeah, and so like we touched on before a little bit about your training, and we talked about the nutrition at the start, but um, can you give us a bit of a sample kind of week in the life of Kenj when you're at your peak? Were you doing double session? I think we talked about that earlier, but you're doing double sessions. Strength work. How many days you're on the board, swimming, so forth. You said, were you working to your strengths? Like you said, you were working towards your weaknesses. Sorry, but how much time did you devote to your swimming versus other aspects?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because I do identify my weaknesses, but I also have to ensure my strength stays my strength. So like normally a week for me, I'll do a swimming squad down at Manly Pool with Justin Rothwell, Monday to Friday. And so Monday morning all the way through to Friday morning. And then 2 afternoons a week, we do surf ski paddling. 2 afternoons a week, we do board paddling. We throw like an Ironman session, which combos them all in there. And then, we throw in I do 2 gym sessions or 2 reformer Pilates sessions, and then probably 2 or 3 running sessions. Coming into a race, though, I try to back off the running and, bring everything right back down. So anywhere from, 10 to 15, 16 sessions a week.
Yeah, awesome. And they're like hour, 2 hour long sessions?
Yeah, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. Yeah.
Awesome. And is that kind of fed into your the UR app, the Total Wellbeing app, using movement, community mindset, and habits to live better, live longer? Has that all your training, what you've learned about training as an elite athlete, recovery, whether it be returning from an injury or recovering after a big grueling event, has that all fed into, I guess, the inspiration for you to start this app? And can you tell our listeners what it's all about, really?
Yeah, well, I guess the inspiration came from a couple of things. So I use a Garmin when I go training, and when I finish training, I kind of have a look at the data, but there was so much data that was overwhelming for me. Really what I wanted to see out of that was pretty much a simple score out of 100 that's relative to to my age and gender, and relate it to somewhat the world's best pace, if that makes sense. The second part of the inspiration behind that was myself and the 2 other co-founders, Grant Ellison and Mark Pasquez. We're all members of Manly Surf Club. And we'd go for a ski paddle on a Saturday morning during winter. And it was probably anywhere from 15 to 20K. And by the time we kind of left, went 10K down and then came back, I'd come in probably 10 minutes ahead of Grant and 5 minutes ahead of Mark. I'd say to Grant, who's 50, I'd say, mate, try and keep up next time. And he said, mate, try and be 50 and still be up where you're at. And then we started thinking about like, okay, if we were to do a race, how much of a head start would I need to give you to come in at the same time? And anyway, Grant's like, oh, you'd have to give me probably 8 minutes or 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, imagine if we could go off go and then we go out, do the course and come back and we both get a score out of 100. relative to someone my age and relative to someone your age, who scores the highest out of 100. And then he thought, shit, let's try and create something that allows us to do that. And Mark, being a paddler also, but understanding the tech stack better than we do, he thought, actually, we could probably do that. One of the paddlers that we train with, he's a data scientist, and he's like, hey, I'll try and create an algorithm for that. So now we've got this score out of 100 that caters for running, swimming, and surf ski paddling. They were our first three sports that we wanted to try and crack. So, for example, I can go do the city to surf with my dad, and I could potentially beat my dad by half an hour, and I score an 80 out of 100, and he comes in half an hour later, but for a 62-year-old man, he's actually scored an 82, and he, in theory, beats me. So that's kind of the nuts of where we started. We want to tie that into some mentoring, whether it be nutritional help, training help, life outside, training and stuff like that. And I guess the premise is just to keep people active and keep them moving. And we track sentiment along the way as well. So how your training affects your mindset. So the app's going to be quite big. We've just finished our MVP product, where we've got just under 1,000 users on it. We've got a couple of partnered with a few events like the Cold Classic and the Australian Ocean Racing Surf Ski Series, where we kind of take all their event data, we scrub it against the algorithm, and we kind of republish results according to people's age, gender, and give them a score out of 100 to see how they're sitting in their age cohort.
It's so such an interesting concept, mate. And it's great, the way you've thought about it, because at the end of the day, it all is relative, isn't it? If you've got an 80-year-old man working, on a certain exercise, and they can't sustain the same, obviously, intensity as someone like you or an elite athlete, but in a relative sense, they may be working at a harder intensity for them. It's an awesome concept there that you're working on. It'll be great to see it once the final product's there and available for everyone. Can we find that on the App Store? Is that available now to download, or when can we?
You can get it through the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, and it's UR, so it's a capital UARE. UR app.
Yeah, right. So we'll put that in the show notes. So any listeners that are interested in having a look at that, they can jump on and download the app. All right, mate. Well, you said before about all the hard work that's gone into your training over time, but you've had some awesome experiences to travel to Japan, America, New Zealand, Hawaii with your training and competing. What's that been like for you now? Looking back on it, the experiences you've gained from all of this persistence in what is a tough sport to be at the top.
Yeah, it is, mate. I've been very lucky to travel to some amazing places, some with surf lifesaving and some without. I think what's getting quite exciting now is the travel to the likes of Hawaii. I'm very fortunate enough to have an amazing partner in Shore and Partners that takes a group of us to go and race the Molokai to Oahu Challenge on the surf ski every year. That sport's growing. As much as we paddle surf ski in our Ironman racing, it's like the surf ski racing on its own is new to me. It's a lot longer. The paddlers are kayakers and Olympic kayakers and the best in the world paddlers. So for me to throw my hat in the ring there and learn from guys like that, but able to be able to travel to Hawaii, or I did a race in the Hood River in the US or Western Australia, and my sport and I guess the sponsors and the community within that sport has allowed me to travel to such amazing places. And look, to be honest, I would not be able to do any of it without the support of my wife. And she's my biggest advocate. She's my biggest fan, whether I'm winning or if I'm losing. She's the one that has to deal with the emotional roller coaster of sport and an athlete. And she asks me, "Are you almost done with this?" Because it's quite tiring. And I said, depending on the year and the result, I say yes or no. And she hangs in there, and she, the one thing I've said to her is that when I hang it up, I'll hang it up for good. I won't be one of those guys that hangs it up and then comes back and changes his mind. But sport's a huge part of my DNA. It's what I know, and it makes me feel good mentally, and it keeps me a happy person. And if I'm a happy person, I feel like I'm a better father and a better husband. So and that's what activity and mornings and movement and exercise does for me.
Well, yeah, all props to you, mate. You've been able to build a career and lifestyle around the water, which is what you love doing, and it's great to hear that you've enjoyed the whole experience as well as competing and traveling, and obviously having the support of your family and friends. Before we wrap things up, mate, we just want to have a chat a bit about what's ahead for you. So I know you've been busy up in the Gold Coast recently, and you've been competing. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's ahead for you in the next
Mm-hmm.
year?
Yeah, so mate, in 2 weeks we head to Western Australia for the Australian titles, surf lifesaving titles. Off the back of that, I'll probably have a couple of weeks off, and then kind of into the surf ski series. We've got a few races up at Foster, and then we go to Hawaii for that Molokai Challenge mid-May, mid to end of May. So, look, in the short term, a lot. It's funny, right? It feels like I'm everywhere but nowhere at the same time. There's a lot happening. It's Leo turns 1 in July, so that's a huge milestone for us. There's a lot happening, but I really just try and. My wife's really good at trying to keep me present. That's one thing that I'm not too good at, is being present. I always like to think about what's next and what's coming up, and I got a good result here, but I want to have a good result next time, and instead of living in that moment. So it's I actually watched this really. I sent it to my wife. There was a video of Tom Hanks that popped up on my phone the other day, and he said they asked him a question about what do you wish you knew when you were younger, right? And he said, man, someone told me this phrase recently. I wish I knew it when I was younger, but it's like, this too shall pass, right? And he said, like, when you're having a tough time and you're down in the dumps and things aren't well and this, blah, 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 I wish someone would have said to me, this too shall pass, right? And then he said, but on the flip side, when things are great, and life's going really well and you're happy and you got good momentum and make a lot of money and this and that, you got to remember this too shall pass, right? So it's all about trying to live within the now. When things are great, really enjoy it, but know that that's not going to last forever, right? And then that next moment approaches, just try and ride it out and live with it, be patient. So I'm trying to, I guess, really wrap my head around that at the moment and kind of understand that. And, there's guys like Lockie Bruce, right? Great mate of mine. He's actually one of my coaches now. And, he's got an injury, right, with his foot. He broke a bone and had to get some surgery on it. And, he's got a moon boot and on this little scooter thing. And, for someone like him, and he's just trying to start his own business, which is a huge, so much to happen all at once, and I think I kind of relate that as well. It's like, dude, you feel like you're going through a really tough time. It'll pass, man. And the good times are going to come, and they're not far. Just be patient, stick to the process and chip away.
Yeah, it's really powerful, mate. I think we could all take some of that too. I know that for a lot of people, it is challenging to live in the moment, especially with all competing priorities, work, children, different business pursuits and so forth. So I just want to leave. I think we'll leave it there, mate. This has been
It's a good chat.
It's been a really awesome chat, and I think that's probably what's going to stick with me when we leave today. And I hope our listeners took something from the episode. But this too shall pass. If there's anything you're going through out there that's tough, challenging at the moment, if multiple things are on your plate and times are tough, times are challenging, you're just going to remember, as Ken says, this too shall pass. So thanks for your time, mate. It's been awesome to have you on the podcast, and I hope our listeners enjoy the chat just as much as I did.